Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way podcast, where we learn in English poco a poco or podcast by podcast. Today, we're focusing on the Cambridge Speaking Exam, Part 4. Now, this is the same for B1, B2, or C1. The structure of the exam doesn't change, so you can all, from B1 all the way to C1, take something for this and add it to your exam preparation. Right, let's get started.
Bienvenido al podcast de The Way. Si quieres aprender inglés y hablar con confianza, estás en el sitio correcto. Hemos ayudado a miles de personas como tú a mejorar su inglés y alcanzar sus objetivos. Visita nuestra web theway.es para conocer más sobre nuestros cursos online desde A2 hasta C1 y descubre cómo podemos ayudarte a avanzar en tu aprendizaje. Además, si necesitas una certificación oficial, también ofrecemos la opción de realizar el examen Language Pair cómodamente desde casa.
First things first, let's go through the structure of the exam. Remember that there are 4 parts of the exam and you are always going to be with a partner in the exam. So there's 2 examiners in the room and you and a partner. The examiner in front of you is the examiner that you interact with, but you acknowledge and you say hello when you walk in to both the examiners, but then afterwards you only focus on the examiner in front of you. Then part 1 is a type of interview type of questions. They are short, more like personal questions like how long have you been learning English? What do you do in your free time? Right? Just general questions. Then part 2 or part 3. So part 2 and part 3 together is one of them is looking at photos. Either you have to answer a question about a photo depending on the level. So something to do with a photo for 1 minute. And then part 3 is when you have an interaction with your partner. Now, in that interaction, it is like a 2-minute conversation, more or less, right? Where you and your partner have to decide more or less what is the best out of all of the options, right? Now, the examiner controls this and the examiner tells you to interact with your partner and you and your partner agree and disagree. Now, if the topic is, for example, about travel, then part 4 is going to follow with the same topic, which will also be about travel. If the topic is about making decisions, then part 4 will be about making decisions. So they're always together, right? So in part 3, you and your partner have to agree and disagree, and you have to look at all of the topics. Now, I call this a closed discussions because the topics are given to you. You don't get to talk about whatever you want. And the idea is that at the end, you and your partner come to an agreement. That's the idea. For eventually, you and your partner to agree and disagree and have a conversation and a discussion until the end of the time, whether it's 2 minutes or whatever, for you to discuss the best options, right? However, it's slightly different in part 4. Now, in part 4, I call it an open discussion because you are also talking about the same topic, but it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. Now, some students are a little bit confused because part 1 are types of questions and part 4 are types of questions. But part 1 is more like interview questions. Questions just to explain a little bit more about yourself and for you to feel a little bit more comfortable, right? In comparison to part 4, where number 1, it's a continuation of the topic from part 3, and number 2, it's more of a justifying opinions, agreeing and disagreeing, and speculating. So this is deeper, a little bit more complicated, and a little bit more difficult because you need to show that you can do critical thinking in English, right? So the objective of part 4 is agreeing and disagreeing, continuing your partner's opinion and giving reasons and opinions, and to obviously to have that interactive opportunity with your partner, because you remember that you get extra points, not extra points. There is an element in the exam where you get points for how you interact with another person in English, right? So all of this is all together. So let's look at the types of questions that you might get asked. So if we're looking at B1 and looking directly at an example of the exam, one of the topics is about free time, right? And the question is it important to do exercise in your free time? Why or why not? right? Now, that question is a very easy question for you to answer. You say yes, and then because. Remember that you always want to show justification and opinion. Now, let's do an example of a question for B2. This would be, for example, do you think you have to spend a lot of money to have a good holiday? Again, why or why not? And then for C1, also, very good question. It says, is it always a good idea to consult with friends or family before making significant decisions? Can you see that the questions are relevant for each topic, right? For B1, it's more flojo, B2, a little bit more intermediate, and C1, you need more critical thinking, right? And always, why or why not, or do you think? And then you have the opportunity to chat with your partner. So the examiner will do this. If you look on the YouTube videos, right, remember that you can look at some examples. Just go onto YouTube, type in Cambridge Speaking Exam B1 or Cambridge Speaking Exam B2, and then you have some options for you to look at what to expect. And if you go to part 4, the examiner always does this. They will say, partner A, Maria, right, and partner B, Pepe, por ejemplo. It says Maria, and then question, blah, 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 blah. And then Maria answers, and then she turns to Pepe and says, Pepe, what do you think? And then Pepe gives his opinion. And then the same. Then she will start, Pepe, what do you think about this? And then Pepe answers, and then the examiner turns to Maria and says, Maria, do you agree? And then Maria has an opportunity to agree or disagree with what Pepe has said. However, usually on the third time, depending on how the interaction is going, the examiner will ask the question to both of them at the same time, and then she usually points with her hands to indicate both together. So not via the examiner, but directly between the two candidates, and will say, Maria and Pepe, what do you think about blah, 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 and then indicates for them to turn to each other and directly have a conversation. And then you can give opinions, agree, disagree, and just have a general conversation. Now, don't get too overwhelmed and worried about this part. As long as you are showing good vocabulary, that's the most important thing, right? Remember, especially with me, and you should be doing this with exam, don't say, I think. In my opinion, I reckon, I suppose, from my perspective, personally speaking, all of that is very good. When it comes to agreeing and disagreeing, please, for the love of God, don't do the Spanish, I am agreed. Don't directly translate. It is, I agree, I disagree. And obviously there's other vocabulary as well. You can say, I think so, or I don't think so. So this is the Spanish creo que sí or creo que no. But students want to directly translate and say, I think yes or I think no, which is a direct translation. It must be with so. I think so, or no, I don't think so. You can also say, I couldn't agree with you more, meaning I agree with you 120%. Or maybe you are not totally in agreement. You can say, I agree in part, or I agree up to a point, and then justify with because, etc. Now, it is, if you are looking at part 4 and you are very close to the exam, it's too late for you to start panicking about the exam. You should be practicing and preparing and improving your English poco a poco throughout the year as you are preparing for the exam. But if your exam is in a week, just focus on these 3 things. Number 1, focus on agreeing and disagreeing and showing opinion and showing justification, meaning full answers, as full as you can, but not monologuing. So it's not a monologue, but you just give a nice full answer. Remember to make eye contact with the examiner or with your partner. So showing interest is the second thing. Remember that this is an interactive part of the exam, and body language doesn't really give you a point, but it shows that you are interacting in the correct manner. And number 3, just remember not to say, I think, and I agree, right? That's the most important thing, is try to pavo real, the basic vocabulary that you have, right? Otherwise, everyone, if you have any questions, you can contact us on any of our social media and we'll answer any questions or doubts that you might have. And if you are doing the exam very soon, we wish you the best of luck and hope to help you improve for your next level, whether it's B1, B2, C1, or maybe even C2. Otherwise, I'll see you soon. Bye.
Si disfrutaste de este episodio y quieres llevar tu inglés al siguiente nivel, te invitamos a descubrir nuestros cursos online en theway.es, diseñados para mejorar tu fluidez y confianza en situaciones reales. Hemos ayudado a miles de personas como tú a transformar su aprendizaje. Visita ahora theway.es y realiza nuestro test de nivel interactivo de manera gratuita. Además, si necesitas una certificación oficial, también ofrecemos la opción de realizar el examen de MidCert cómodamente desde casa.
This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sac.edu to get started.